So everybody gets tied up. Who's Mexico paying for the wall? Are we paying for? I don't really care who's paying for the wall because the taxpayers are getting an amazing return on the investment from that wall system. Improved security, less agents, and we didn't send those agents home. We sent those agents up the coast of California. They started knocking down boats left and right. We put them on task forces to look for terrorism, Joint Terrorism Task Force, Tunnel Task Force, and we shifted them over to Arizona and Texas, where they either didn't have wall or it wasn't feasible at the time, or it just wasn't there yet, right? But my point is they became more effective. So it doesn't really matter how you look at it, unless your intent is to let people just flow across into the United States at will. There's really nothing negative about the border wall.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
We cut through the partisan talking points. We're not interested in perpetuating fear. We're interested in seeking truth, hearing what's really going on America's borderland. Welcome to Borderland, an Ironclad original. I'm Vince Vargas, your host, and on this episode we have former Chief of the Border Patrol, Rodney Scott, telling us about his experience as the chief during the Trump era. This podcast is filled with so much information I think is pertinent right now for you guys to hear this. He answers a lot of questions that I had personally on the topic of immigration, of Border Patrol. Here it is. Hope you enjoy it. Well, Chief, long time coming. I'm very honored to have you on the podcast. We established this podcast about a year ago now to give experts a platform to state their case, right? To talk about, their expertise and for us to ask questions on it. You've been in the game for a while. You've been very public about your opinion on what happens on the border, the administration, and everything that happens currently. And, I've been wanting to get you on here, and it's perfect time to get you on now.
Perfect. I'm excited to be here.
So if you don't mind for the audience, would you give no, you're good. If you don't mind for the audience, give a quick kind of bio of your background.
Sure. So obviously Rodney Scott. A lot of people think of me as the retired chief of U.S. Border Patrol. I was the chief under the Trump administration and then the first 7 months of the Biden administration. But I like to highlight, I'm actually a Border Patrol agent. I was a Border Patrol agent for about 30 years, started out in San Diego in 1992 when the border was completely kind of chaotic. And then throughout my career, just watched progress. First, it was Clinton stepped in and said, hey, well, this is insane. We've got to do something to secure the border, make sure we know who and what's coming into our home. And then over my entire career, my career primarily was Southern California and Southern Arizona, and then DC, of course. But basically just working day in and day out on how do we improve the border security of the United States. And when I say border security, I mean just simply what I stated a second ago. Our ability as a government to know and control who and what is entering our national home. It's pretty much that simple.
Well, and for those who are out there listening, why is that important?
Why is it important in your own house? Seriously, like I like to use that analogy a lot because of the border. It's just so nebulous. A lot of people have a hard time, wrapping their head around border security policy and immigration policy and these different things. So I like to highlight just that. It's exactly the same as your home, just on a bigger level. At your home, you expect people, and by the way, this is pretty much globally, you expect people to come to your established entry point, usually your front door. On a national level, we have ports of entry that by law, those are our front door. We have 328 of them. And then literally you apply a threat matrix, if you will. You don't probably think about it. The average American doesn't think about it, but you're doing a risk assessment every single time somebody knocks on your door and you're deciding, do I let them in? Do I open the door? Do I not? Well, Customs and Border Protection officers and Border Patrol agents, to a certain extent, that's their job. But really that threat assessment is Customs and Border Protection officers' jobs at the ports of entry. But unlike you, or you just get to make it up, Congress gave them rules, regulations, and laws that they just have to enforce about who and what comes into our home. And it's very, very important, again, backing up, just like your home. If you can't control who and what enters your home, who has, and let's get down in the weeds, who has access to your daughter's bedroom or your son's bedroom or your bedroom, you have no safety or security. And there's nothing racist or xenophobic about that. So you expect people to come to the front door. Anybody sneaks into your house any other way, it's going to normally elicit a response. If you live in a city, maybe that's calling 911. If you live in a more rural area, you're going to probably take care of yourself. So on a national level, that is United States Border Patrol's job. Again, overly simplifying it, it's simply to make sure, U.S. Border Patrol's job is to make sure that everybody and everything coming and going from our country goes through those front doors, the 328 ports of entry. We really don't care how fat you are, what color your hair what you have that day, or how many piercings you have. If you cross the border outside of a legal port of entry, it's Border Patrol's job to identify you, stop you from doing that, and then depending on what crimes are associated, immigration, narcotics, whatever else, put you in the right box. And again, maybe I'm overly simplifying it, but that seems to resonate with most people. They're like, oh yeah, I would freak out if somebody was coming into my house somewhere other than the front door. Same thing on a national level. And then just because I'm on this tangent, if you will, I like to remind people, don't get into the weeds on these issues, at least not right at first. When you get sucked into a discussion about immigration policy or legalization of certain narcotics or anything else, those conversations are fine. However, they're predicated on an ability to enforce it. So border security always has to come first. Border security, again, is the ability to detect, to know who and what is entering the country, and then to basically stop anything that's violating the law. Without that ability, any conversation about is and isn't legal is kind of a waste of oxygen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. During your time as an agent, have you seen, so I grew up in the LA area. When I saw, the September 11th issue that happened, when that happened, I saw a whole change of the security of this country, right? I entered the military to defend the country. I was doing things overseas in hopes to dismantle some kind of terrorist organization that was potentially a future threat to America. And then I came and joined the Border Patrol in 2009. And in my time, I saw only one president was in the space that I remember was the Obama administration, and what I had to deal with in the sense of dealing with deportations or helping with any kind of situation there. Most people were getting arrested at the time because we had Operation Streamline was happening during the Del Rio sector area. During your time, you saw several presidents.
Yeah.
And in that, which president did you see that was starting to make big impacts on immigration?
So to be quite honest, all of them except for one, and I'll talk through that because I thank you for bringing this up, because border security shouldn't be political. But as I mentioned before, I got in 1992. Immigration, and in the context most people talked about it then, and even as the agents saw it back then, it really was Western Hemisphere, primarily Mexicans and people from South America coming up to work and get jobs. But it was chaotic. It was literally destroying the border, meaning the border communities, like even Tijuana on the south side. It was like a huge, massive transient area, and then all the problems that come with that. So it was actually Bill Clinton, a Democrat, was the first one to step up. And there's tons of video out there. People can go still watch it. And he said, enough is enough. We have to control this. Even to just preserve our legal immigration system, we have to be able to stop this massive flow of illegal immigration. So under Bill Clinton, we initiated Operation Gatekeeper, Operation Hold the Line. Those were named operations. But I like to tell people, basically, a second line supervisor just kind of dumbing it down for us as young agents out in the field, put it best. He goes, you know what, really, we're trying to just clean up this clutter, slow down the flow, clean up the clutter so we can focus on and find the real threats. Because right now, it's just chaos. That stuck with me, and I would challenge anybody. We've changed the terminology, man. DC, and I even got sucked into it, right? DC loves buzzword bingo and naming things and changing terms. But that strategy that was implemented in the late 93 going into 1994, that literally said, let's find ways to slow down and deter illegal immigration before it happens, so that when something does cross the border, we're not overwhelmed. We can actually respond effectively and then keep America safe. We have literally maintained that deterrent strategy for 27 years until January 21st, 2021. It didn't matter if it was Clinton, Bush, Obama, Bush, Trump, It didn't matter, right? All of them actually supported that deterrent strategy at different levels, and they focused on different parts. But every single day of my career until January 21st, 2021, the border was getting more and more secure. We would have spikes in illegal activity, but we responded to them. Anytime there was a loophole, we had work groups put together to figure out how to close that loophole, all focused on just making sure on behalf of America that we knew who and what was coming into the country, and we included it. Unfortunately, the current administration, and again, this isn't political, it's just factual. They campaigned on it. I'm not saying anything that's a secret. They were very adamant. They were going to stop the deterrent strategy. They were going to shut down physical deterrence and policy deterrence, and then focus on speeding up the processing of people once they came into the United States, and then as quickly as possible adjudicate their claims or their case, if you will. And then if they're ordered deported, in theory, they would be deported. I won't even get into that political aspect because the first part's just factual. It doesn't matter who's in the administration. They've said that outright. We warned them. I personally warned them over and over again that literally there's just too many people in the world that want to come here. It's going to overwhelm us. We're not going to be able to control the border at all. And that would effectively give the cartels control to decide who and what enters the country instead of us. But as you can see over the last 3.5 years, they didn't listen. And they went completely the other direction. Again, I argue the immigration, we talk about it a lot, but the real threat right now is that the U.S. Border Patrol, because of these massive numbers, can't tell you with any level of confidence who and what is coming into the country. You know this, but a lot of the viewers or listeners probably don't. It's all about the second wave. So literally the cartels stage illegal aliens, and then they push them across the border to overwhelm whatever law enforcement they think is in the area. Yeah, they make money off of that, but the reason they're really doing it is because people pay extra to not be fingerprinted. They pay extra to not interact with law enforcement. And then, of course, all the narcotics that aren't replaceable, that is all in the second wave. So they hold that back until they think the law enforcement is distracted, and they push across that second wave. That second wave over the last 3.5 years has pretty much made it without exception. As you know, the U.S. Border Patrol has documented and reported out almost 2 million known gotaways, but there's a lot of borders. We don't have any surveillance or technology out there. So if there's not an agent patrolling it, we have no idea what's out there. So looping back to the question you asked, and again, I'm not playing favorites here. This is just factual. Without any kind of hesitation at all, the president that actually put our strategy on steroids and probably did more faster than any other president was clearly President Trump. It was one of his top pet peeve issues. But I would say it was because he listened to us and we explained to him how the cartel was using illegal immigration. This was early on, 2016-ish. The union interacted with him, explained to him how the cartel was using illegal immigration to basically completely annihilate border security. And this is the other thing people don't think about. We're also talking about nation state threats and terrorism, not just, economic migrants. I couldn't tell you, actually, I think I have a number, 73,000 Chinese poured across the border this last year. 73,000. And they're primarily single adults. I think 60 plus thousand of that was single adults, primarily males. That is a nation state adversary. You don't leave China in those massive numbers and come here without the government's approval. There's a lot of people from Iran, Russia. I could go through all these numbers, but these are the Border Patrol's job. We never talk about that aspect of it, but it's just to detect and stop anything and everybody coming in. You touched on the terrorism. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but my first part of my entire career, like every other agent, it was illegal immigration primarily. I thought about like migrant workers or whatever, economic migration, and narcotics. It really wasn't until 9/11 that we started talking about, I don't even remember anybody ever talking about terrorism before that. But I got yanked out of the field. I was a second line supervisor. Back then it was an FOS. Now it would be a watch commander in Nogales, Arizona. CBP gets created. We're given a briefing to a new commissioner. And then I kind of went off script and mouthed off a little bit. I actually thought I was probably going to get fired or demoted. And then shortly thereafter, I was getting asked to go to DC, work on a couple policy issues, and then set up CBP's Office of Anti-Terrorism. So from 2003 to about 2008, I spent a vast majority of my time working with three-letter agencies, working with DoD. Sounds like you were probably in theater, working with people that were in theater to make sure any information over there that was relevant to border security actually got into our systems. Agents wouldn't necessarily know where that information came from or what it was, but they'd get a flag, right? They fingerprinted somebody and all of a sudden it popped up, hold that guy for somebody else to come talk to him. Those were all the things I was working on behind the scenes. And to be honest, I was pissed. I was like, why has no one told us about any of this information before? Once I was looking at high side intel that existed before 9/11, about threats coming across the border in areas I had specifically worked. And I'm like, are you kidding me? No one thought to share this with U.S. Border Patrol before? So that's always also in the back of my mind, that it's not just what you see on TV. We worked for years. The threat for 9/11, or actually 9/11 itself, was a vulnerability at ports of entry. But we knew that as we shut down those ports of entry and made it harder and harder for people to come through a port of entry to commit acts of terrorism or threaten the country, where would they go next? They would go in between the ports. So we spent millions of dollars basically building out training for our intel agents and for our interview agents on JTTFs, but to detect deception, to elicit responses. We work at three-letter agencies. Anyway, because we were focused on what? We were focused on slowing down the flow so agents could spend more time actually interviewing the people that they caught, and that we could figure out who the real threats are. All that went away January 21st, 2021. Again, not political, but it just went away. I've talked to several of the guys. There's no time right now because of the massive flow to do any of those intelligence debriefs at all. It's insane.
Hey guys, it's your boy Rocco. I wanted to share with you guys a new fitness app that I've been using called MTNTOUGH. If you're serious about pushing your limits and building your mental toughness, you gotta go check out MTNTOUGH. This isn't your average fitness app. It's built for those who never back down from a challenge. MTNTOUGH started by training backcountry hunters for multi-day, high-elevation, rugged terrain and the ability to pack an elk in mountains. The training translated so well to the tactical application that many special operations, military, first responders, and law enforcement officers use the app today. You can see on their YouTube channel that they've been sharing their knowledge and training with guys like the 75th Ranger Regiment, which I was also a part of. This app allows you to train wherever you are with minimal equipment requirements. So whether you're in the gym, outdoors, at home, you can access top-tier workouts that fit your goals and lifestyle. In other words, you have no excuse. I have gone through my phases of my workouts, trying to get big, trying to get better, trying to get faster, trying to get this, and currently, this is the app I'm using. I want to be more functional in the field while out there with the Border Patrol filming what happens day in and day out on the borders. Download MTNTOUGH app today and use the promo code Borderland to get a 14-day free trial and 1 month free. That's 6 weeks of MTNTOUGH at no cost. Go get them. One thing that's kind of crazy is that when I was in country, I did Afghanistan twice and Iraq once, and Iraq was probably the biggest one for us as in gathering intel. And we had several agencies with us as we killed or captured higher value targets, right? And that's where I first learned that there's a potential, why we're gathering some of this information, is the potential for them, information of using the southern border to come into the country. That's the first time I heard of it. And somebody introduced me the idea of Border Patrol and BORTAC. And that's why eventually when I got out, my mission was to get into the special operations teams and work that angle for the same idea of protecting our country on our own soil now, doing the same mission I was doing overseas, essentially. And so I was taught that in 2005, that was a threat to America. And that's why it became a very interesting mission for me.
Well, 100%. And it's just as big, if not a bigger threat today than ever before. But yet we don't ever talk about it. And again, I hate to go political, but I spent most of my career in Southern California. So I was used to talking to people that didn't really support border security, were more open border. And when I would sit down and have conversations with them and take them to the border and walk them around, almost, not 100%, but almost without exception, they'd be like, oh, this is more complicated than I thought. They would go back and they would start working with us. And And it started a fairly good conversation. So I was pretty confident as chief when the Biden administration came in that all the rhetoric was just campaign rhetoric. That once they came in, matter of fact, I remember telling the staff, because a lot of people were in Border Patrol were kind of freaking out. Don't worry about it. Everybody campaigns and they say all this crazy stuff. But as soon as they come in, we give them the briefings. They see the high side intel. They look at our strategy, what we're really doing, and they realize this is not some Nazi organization. This is just common sense, making sure we know who and what enters our country. If they want to change who and what enters, they can change that anytime they want. They just go to Congress. Everything will be okay. Man, I was naive. I honestly, like, I never fathomed the thought that they would not want to hear a word we had to say, that they would shut down all of our expert work groups, if you will, that had agents from the field, that had leadership, it had people from ICE working on all these issues. They basically sent all the career govies home and replaced them with political appointees that had an opinion of how they wanted the world to be, and they had no intention to listen to anything we had to say about how it really was. But the reason I bring all that up is what you just said. Almost overnight, we were banned, because when you're still an employee, and you know this, different administrations have different levels of control of what you can and can't say. They'll give you talking points, or they'll at least give you left and right boundaries. The Biden administration put a complete gag order, even on me as the chief, on the entire organization, and basically said, unless you have pre-approved talking points, you can't talk. And then when we submitted anything that had to do with terrorism threats, criminal aliens, narcotics and addiction, anything other than economic migrants crossing the border for a better life, we were told no, or we were ignored. We weren't allowed to talk about it anymore. That is still going on till today. That's why you don't hear anything about all these other threats. The career personnel aren't allowed to talk about it.
So you were the chief when the Biden administration took over?
Correct. Yep. So, and then if the administration changes again, you'll see it. So there's a transition period. So I was the chief during the Trump administration and the Biden. But if a presidential administration is changing from the time that the election is certified until the inauguration day, a team comes in and you're supposed to brief them. They call it a transition team. They ask a bunch of questions, you brief them. And the idea is, hey, you want, no matter who cares, right? You want the new president to be informed and to be able to make good decisions from day one. So you're kind of pre-briefing them as much as you can without going high side, because they don't have clearances and stuff until after the inauguration. And then right after the inauguration, boom, full speed, you give them all the rest of the story. They didn't want any of it. The transition team, we briefed them because they don't have really the authority at that point to tell you to shut up. So we briefed them, and you could tell by the looks on their faces and their answers and stuff, they didn't like what we had to say. I think they thought we were blowing it out of proportion. But then when they came in, and on literally within 5 minutes of Biden being inaugurated, the new chief of staff for CBP, Lise Clavel, came in and basically put a gag order on us and told us, here's the new rules. You're not allowed to speak anymore. And then over the next 6.5, almost 7 months, we were briefing her. We were briefing the nominated commissioner, Chris Magnus. That's another story. We could do a 2-hour podcast on that genius. Anyway, they didn't want to hear it. But here's the fact: whether it was me or whether it was other senior leadership within Border Patrol or CBP, they were all briefed. So everything that's happened since then has been intentional. It's intentional decisions that were made to advance their worldview. Some would call it a political agenda, but it's really their worldview. So when people think everything that happened over the last few years is just like, accidental chaos, that is not it at all. Those were informed decisions. We explained to them exactly what would happen, and they made the decisions anyway.
Hey guys, this is Bear Hanlon, co-founder of Born Primitive, and I just wanted to let you know about a big campaign we are doing to give back to veterans this Veterans Day weekend. A couple months ago, we wrote a check to pay off $2.5 million of veteran medical bill debt. And we need your help because we want to get that number to 5 million by Monday night, which is Veterans Day. So we will be pledging 100% of profits from our site, bornprimitive.com, to accomplish that goal. So with this Veterans Day campaign, we also launched our brand new Freedom Capsule, which is 2 brand new colorways of our Savage One training shoe that pay homage to the American Revolution and the founding values of our republic. The first one is our Betsy Ross edition. It's a classic red, white, and blue shoe that has the Betsy Ross flag as well as We the People on the inner heel. We also have the Don't Tread on Me edition. This is a black and yellow design with the Gadsden snake on the inner heel. For those that don't know, the Gadsden snake was flown in the first ever naval battle. One of the things that we did to bring this capsule to life was we created these limited number of mahogany wooden boxes that contain additional components that tie back to the American Revolution. So we have our founding documents, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. We also have inlaid, this is oak from the USS Constitution, which is our first ever naval warship. And of course, the flintlock pistol, which is symbolic of the weaponry used at the time, particularly early on in the naval battles. Inlaid with that, we have the Betsy Ross flag etched into the wood, as well as the Gadsden snake etched into the wood. Overall, just a beautiful piece that ties back to those founding values of our country. On our site, we have something for everyone. We have fitness apparel, hunting apparel, tactical, jeans, flannels, you name it, we have it. So if this is a cause you want to get behind and you want to support veterans, head to bornprimitive.com. November 8th through the 11th, we will pledge every penny of profit in hopes of paying off $5 million of veteran medical debt. We hope you'll be a part of it. Thank you for joining the cause.
Let's go to the wall.
Okay.
How did the wall become a political argument? Because during my time, I was in Eagle Pass and they were building a wall and no one cared about it. They were building a wall that actually displaced people from their homes that their families had owned for generations just to complete the wall. But again, there was no political argument about it. So can you help me understand why that is?
Sure. So in total transparency, though, there was always political opposition to any type of border infrastructure, whether it be a wall, a fence, or anything else. So again, going clear back to the Clinton administration, that was the first time we really started building out any type of border barrier. Again, San Diego and El Paso primarily, but that was the old landing mat fence. It was literally scrap metal we got from the military that we used to build a border wall. President Bush comes around, 9/11 happens, the Secure Fence Act blows that up. So we start building significantly more border wall. There were always people kind of like, I'll just make it up. Let's just say 95% support, 5% don't, but it was a very loud 5 or 10% in places like San Diego, El Paso, some other little pockets that were very anti-border wall. Operationally, though, it just makes sense. And as I explained to Congress, when I explained this to people in San Diego, even on the far left that hated it at first, this was a piece that they understood. Early in my career in San Diego, pre-border wall, we had 3 to 5 high-speed vehicle pursuits every single day. They would literally just blast across the border. Even with the rudimentary landing mat fence that we put up in San Diego, they would cut it at night and we would still get probably 3 to 5 high-speed pursuits through San Diego, actually probably about 15 to 20 high-speed pursuits through San Diego every week. When we built out the improved border wall system, which is more than just a barrier, it literally shut that off. Like literally it ended those high-speed pursuits. So if there's no other metric whatsoever, you just collapsed border security back to the border and you just kept everybody north of that line, if you will, safe from these high-speed pursuits that were like during morning hours when kids are going to school and everything else. But from a business perspective, again, going back to San Diego, where we built out this concept, just a short 14-mile section of border wall system allowed me to dramatically improve border security from like literally we had no idea what was going on to where we were well into the 90s of effectiveness, meaning we were catching over 9 out of 10 people that illegally entered the United States. We basically just shut it down. But more important than that, we did it with 150 fewer agents in that 14 miles every 24 hours than before the border infrastructure went in. So that equates to and this isn't a lot of numbers, I'm sorry, but that equated to a $28 million return on investment in salaries and benefits alone, not even talking about the improved border security, just in the savings of salaries and benefits of agents every single year for the life cycle of that border infrastructure. So everybody gets tied up, who's Mexico paying for the wall? Are we paying for? I don't really care who's paying for the wall because the taxpayers are getting an amazing return on the investment from that wall system, improved security, less agents, and we didn't send those agents home. We sent those agents up the coast of California. They started knocking down boats left and right. We put them on task forces to look for terrorism, Joint Terrorism Task Force, Tunnel Task Force, and we shifted them over to Arizona and Texas, where they either didn't have wall or it wasn't feasible at the time, or just wasn't there yet, right? But my point is they became more effective. So it doesn't really matter how you look at it, unless your intent is to let people just flow across into the United States at will. There's really nothing negative about the border wall. Some environmentalists talk about migration patterns of animals and everything else. You know, when you actually build significant sections of border wall, the system, if you will, we can build in easily wildlife corridors and everything else. And then you just only got an agent or two and some technology watching those, because you know it's a known vulnerability and they can't, I use the term juke you. They can't run a group to your right and then run the real group to the left because you've made it so much harder. It really wasn't until the Trump administration, when Trump said, hey, this really works. And again, he didn't think this up by himself. He asked Border Patrol agents. And he had all that info, all that data. He said, yep, we're going to build out a border wall. Makes sense because it's a great return on investment for the American taxpayer.
Yeah,
I won't get into
funny.
the Mexico paying for it thing. And then all of a sudden it became political overnight.
Well, that's the problem.
And people that supported it before all of a sudden hated it. They couldn't tell you why. They just did.
I try to explain it to people, and again, not political in the sense of like, I've used the wall to my advantage as an agent working in an area that's very desolate and hard to manage, and you use it as a force multiplier. It actually did help in areas to funnel traffic in areas that we can manage easier. And when you explain that to people, they don't understand the functionality of it as it helps in security. They more thought of it as just a political posturing. And it's like, no, whatever Trump said about it, it's irrelevant in my head. For me as an agent, it meant so much more. And also knowing that it was before Trump that we started putting walls up. For some reason, that's the history of the wall build is lost on people. So then they just use it as a Trump era kind of idea. But no, this is a border security history. Like you said, they've been building this more fortified walls to help benefit us securing our borders. And for some reason, that's lost in the conversation. That's why I asked.
No, I agree 100%, but here's a couple things. And again, I'm going to get a little, I don't mean to be political. Again, this is just factual. It started to get a little bit more political during the Obama administration, because over my career, the Obama administration was the first administration that really put the reins about public affairs and public communication on the U.S. Border Patrol. So there's always agents, I've gotten arguments with agents actually about this. Agents would tell you that we've always been restricted. We can't talk. Well, I get that, but not leadership. So, and it's all about consistency. It's not about, trying to hide anything. But throughout my entire career, the sector chiefs or the chief of the Border Patrol were the ones, hey, this is our strategy. This is where we're going. Here's our talking points. But the Obama administration locked that down. So honestly, if you look back and think this through, the media, and you can actually ask any journalist that's been around for a while. I've had this conversation with tons of them. The journalists started going to the Border Patrol union during the Obama administration because senior leadership in the Border Patrol wasn't allowed to talk. So fast forward, that's honestly when Trump ran, he got most of his information from the Border Patrol union, not from Border Patrol leadership. A few other people talked to him probably, but operationally it's the same information. It's irrelevant. It was extremely competent information about how the wall helps the agents out in the field. It's common sense, right? And then he supported it. And then the Trump administration's guidance to us, and I think we were actually finally winning people over and bringing them around, was just go tell America what's going on. I wasn't restricted from talking to the media at all. I actually did a monthly news conference when we rolled out the end of the month stats every time. We would stand in a conference room in the Reagan building in DC and just answer questions until the reporters were done asking. And a lot of skeptics, when we had this type of a conversation, and I would explain, no, we started the border wall meaningfully under Clinton. And this is what it did for us. Oh yeah, we got rid of that landing mat because we realized people could hide behind it and then just hit us with a barrage of rocks. We went to the Ballard for officer safety. And when you start and explain the evolution of the border wall system and how we were perfecting it constantly, and honestly, and you use some analogies like, hey, have you ever been to a county fair or a concert or a sporting event? What's the first thing they do? Or DC, what's the first thing they do when they control access? They put up fences so that the security guards, if you will, or the cops are more effective. And then they set up checkpoints and gates for people to come and go. There's nothing about this that should be political. But man, the minute there's just that Trump derangement thing, the minute that Trump pushed it and supported it. And again, I'm not saying I'm a big fan of all the rhetoric, it's all true, but it is also true that there are legitimate asylum seekers and everything else. My thing is, let's get back to the basics. Do you want to know who and what is in our home or not? Because if you don't, just get rid of CBP, Border Patrol, and everybody else, because you're wasting a lot of money, taxpayer money, faking that we want to know and control who and what comes into our country. But if you really want to know and you care about your tax dollars being spent wisely, the first thing you want to do is make, like, I like the term you use, the force multiplier. You use tools that make every agent more effective, because the agents cost you money every single day they're working, every minute they're working. The infrastructure is one investment for a lot longer amount of time. And it's common sense.
Let me ask you about the kids in cages that time.
Yeah.
So why did we, as much as I understand it, it's still confusing. So please go.
Sure. So let's back up. First off, there's no such thing as kids in cages.
Right.
So I want your listeners that don't understand the border environment to think about this. The United States Border Patrol comes in contact with a large number of kids. I mean, it's not the overwhelming, but right, is a large number. Some are unaccompanied, some are with their families. But I want you to think about, what did you just see in your mind when I said unaccompanied kids? So that's probably what you saw. Border Patrol interacts with kids that literally from all these different countries that would literally be just like the kid down the street. 13, 12, let's just say 12 or 13-year-old. But at the exact same time, the United States Border Patrol also encounters unaccompanied kids, unaccompanied juveniles that are 12 or 13, the exact same age, that have been in a gang since they were like 8. We actually arrested some people in San Diego once that their job for the cartel, I just hate to get gruesome, but this is a fact, was to cut up bodies and put the pieces in barrels of acid to make them disappear. And they've been doing that for years. And they're gang members. They haven't really been living at home. And then now they're the same age. So by U.S. standards, they're just an unaccompanied kid. But we don't know who's who yet. Oh, by the way, and then there's all the different nationalities and gang factions. So you may have a kid from a gang that fights with another gang, whatever. But we don't know any of that. We're triaging at the border, because when they cross, we're just taking them to a station and putting them together. We need time to sort that out. So the chain link fence, when we looked at it, was the most, again, cost-effective tool we had to partition people off from each other, especially during that triage. And a big part of it was because not only could we see what was going on, so if anything happened, 2 or 3 agents could be watching a lot of people, but you could also hear it. Because think about it, what do kids do all the time when they're trying to hide something from adults? 2 or 3 kids will make a wall, something will be going on behind the wall, the human little wall, and you may not be able to see it with the naked eye, but if in those environments where we had the chain link fencing, which is around every playground in the United States, it's around sporting events, fairgrounds, you name it, there's nothing inherently bad about chain link fencing. We use that to partition them off and keep the boys away from the girls. And then once we identified that, hey, these gangs are going to clash, we could separate them out or whatever else. But my point is, you have to separate them somehow. That's just the right thing to do. And then you want to keep them as safe as possible. Today, because a guy named Jacob Soboroff from NBC coined the phrase kids in cages, and I won't get into all this. I could do another story on that whole thing, because very, very misleading journalism, very intentionally, by the way, because he's kind of an activist. He knew why we were doing what we were doing, and then when he started reporting it out, kind of left out some key pieces on purpose, and then it blew up into this kids in cages story. But now we use vinyl, like plastic clear vinyl sheeting, like 1/4 inch thick, to create these basically cells, if you will, or short-term detention space. But you can't hear as well. So because of people's overreaction to something they don't even understand, they've actually made the kids less safe. We have cameras and we do everything we try to in there, but you have to take the kid in custody. That's just, and I think the average American doesn't understand that. But what would you want us to do? Just leave them out on the street? They're a kid, right? Or a family or whatever. Once you take them into custody, you have to maintain their safety. But I would argue that they're less safe today because the agents can't really hear what's going on nearly as well as we could before. We overreacted to a political, not a real operational issue, a political issue. And then if you're talking about the next phase about zero tolerance, one of the deterrences for crime in the United States is that you get prosecuted. And then, so we were prosecuting people for crossing the border illegally. When you get a DUI as a Joe Blow American, or you commit a crime and you get arrested, you go through the judicial system on your own by yourself. We don't force your family to be drugged through the judicial system or go to jail with you or anything else. So when we started prosecuting more people for entering the country illegally, their families did not have to go to jail with them either. So some people on the far left call that family separation, and they made this big deal about the fact that the kids weren't side by side with the parent as they were going through their legal processes. And then obviously that exploded, and we overreacted to that as well.
What's going on, everybody? I want to let you know about an ongoing effort in Western North Carolina to help victims of Hurricane Helene and how you can help our friends at the Sentinel Foundation. The hurricane has displaced people around the region and destroyed countless homes. However, Sentinel is on the ground helping. They've been actively getting critical supplies to residents in some of the area's most isolated locations. They've been able to provide over 60 Starlink systems to fire departments, police departments, and churches so that they can communicate and coordinate for their communities. They've also organized both aircraft and ground units to transport and deliver donations. So far, they've accepted and organized an estimated 7 million pounds of materials and distributed about 4 million pounds to support the ongoing relief efforts. Sentinel has also continued to monitor reports of child trafficking, exploitation within the area of operation through law enforcement. To find out more about their efforts to help hurricane victims and their anti-child exploitation efforts, and to see how you can help, please check out foundationsentinel.org.
So we're so excited to launch this new piece for the Navy SEAL Foundation. We're titling it I Am. This piece plays out all the aspects that go unseen inside of the life of a team guy, the life of a family member. Everything we do for the foundation, we want it to do justice to the cause and for the community. So we want authenticity, and we want it to make a difference. So we hope you get that from this. We're so excited to launch it.
Why does the Border Patrol house them? Is there anything in our government that's supposed to be housing migrants? Why is it the Border Patrol's job now of doing that?
So they shouldn't be housing them. So the way, first off, it's the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection officers at the ports of entry. They're the only federal law enforcement on the U.S. side that doesn't get to meter or pick and choose what crimes that they see. Does that make sense? So the reason Border Patrol ends up with all these people is because they cross the border and Border Patrol catches them, or Customs and Border Protection catches them. By law, any unaccompanied minor is supposed to be transferred. They're supposed to be processed quickly and then transferred. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me back up. There's a differentiation. Anybody from Mexico or Canada, because there's a contiguous border, we can actually deport them pretty quickly. So any unaccompanied minor from any country other than Canada or Mexico that is arrested by U.S. Border Patrol or Customs and Border Protection, they're supposed to be processed as quickly as possible and then transferred to Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. Think of that as the federal level child protective services for migrants, for aliens, as quickly as possible. No more, absolute max 72 hours. But historically, Health and Human Services has been underfunded, so is Border Patrol, and they just haven't picked up. So literally, there would be kids stuck in Border Patrol custody. This is what happened back in 2015. This is what happened a little bit, I think 2019-ish, is literally Health and Human Services basically just said, yeah, we don't have enough space, so we'll come pick them up when we can. But that doesn't stop the next wave from crossing. Border Patrol still has to arrest, still has to arrest, still has to arrest. So that's why you'd see them backing up in Border Patrol stations. That all came to a head in 2020. It was actually one of my pet peeves, if you will, that I didn't believe Border Patrol should be stuck with them. So we had a little bit of a clash. I did as chief with Health and Human Services. Give you a little insight. It got a little ugly, but we told them that, hey, I understand that you don't have the capability to come pick all these kids up, so we're going to bring them to you and start dropping them off in your office. Anyway, it went to the White House, became a big issue, got some attention, and then finally HHS found some additional funding. So you remember in 2019, the still Trump administration, going into the Biden administration, 2020, they opened up like convention centers and community centers all across the country and had them packed with illegal alien kids that came across by themselves. Really, the peak of that hit during the Biden administration, because within the first few weeks of the Biden administration, they made a decision to not send any unaccompanied minors back, and it was still Title 42. But they basically went on TV and said any kid that crosses the border is not going to be sent back. Well, guess what? The entire world sent their kids to America, so it kind of blew up in our face. But you don't see them backing up in Border Patrol custody as much anymore because Health and Human Services has really been forced to take custody of them. Now, there's a negative to this, by the way. Health and Human Services has put in a metric on how fast can they find a sponsor for the kid and then release them into the U.S. And that's why you hear about this 320-some thousand kids that are missing, is because as a state level, Child Protective Services has a lot of follow-up, home visits, making sure everything's good. At a federal level, none of that takes place. By law, all HHS has to do is find a sponsor, find somebody willing to take the kid that they think, by whatever their criteria is a safe host and is willing to make sure the kid goes to their immigration hearings. And then HHS releases them to that person and then basically cuts ties.
So who lost the 300,000?
Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement. And by the way, let's define lost, because and again, total transparency, I'm not trying to slam any part of the administration. It just means they can't find them today. They're not following up on them. But a lot of this is a very sophisticated, very intentional smuggling loophole. So a lot of those kids were basically smuggled across or brought across, knowing that an illegal alien parent or guardian or somebody else was going to come sponsor them, and then they'd go hide. It's not like, anyway, a lot of them, that's their entire intent. As soon as they're released into the United States, that's the goal. They don't really care about immigration status. They just want to be released into the United States, and then they disappear because they don't want to be deported. Unfortunately, what that whole mechanism has also created is this huge vulnerability for child trafficking. Because when you're just releasing kids to these sponsors and you don't know who they're at or where they're at, that I guarantee more kids have been trafficked under this regime than ever before as well, because chaos creates more chaos, and criminals always take advantage of chaos. How do you fix all this? You just slow down the flow and make sure that Border Patrol agents do what they're trained to do, which is actually interview the kids, interview the adults, make sure they know who's who, and then you reinstitute vetting at the HHS ORL side before they go to a sponsor. This administration banned ICE from engaging in that process because they don't want illegal alien parents to be afraid to come pick up their illegal alien kid and face deportation. Just put that back in place. Let ICE do the investigations like they need to and like they should. And then we'll make sure that kids are actually going to their real parents. And then if they need to be deported, that they're actually deported. I'm sorry, but that's the law. If we don't like it, we should just change the law.
Yeah, I got really frustrated watching everything that happened with the media and how they were demonizing the Border Patrol career field. It was frustrating because someone who actually done the job was like, wait a minute, it's not like that. You're making us look bad, and that's not fair. And so that's why I went and wrote the book. I contacted you. I contacted several other chiefs, just like what can I say here? How does the polarization of the immigration debate affect morale and operational decisions in the Border Patrol?
So it's really tanked the morale. And again, I wouldn't say, going back full circle, I want to make sure everybody understands immigration policy and border security are totally different. Border security is simply knowing who and what enters. Immigration policy is the legal aspect that says who and what is, or who is allowed to enter and stay. But here's the catch. Bad immigration policy that results in people being released or even believing that they're going to be released into the United States creates an overwhelming pull for so much illegal immigration that it will always destroy our ability to secure the border. So bad policy completely destroys the border. Good policy makes border security a lot easier because it slows down the flow, just hold people accountable. But they're very interrelated, but they're different. What's going on right now is such horrific immigration policy that it's literally prevented Border Patrol agents from doing their job. So again, their job isn't to process illegal aliens. Their job is to secure America by knowing who and what enters. But that 2 million gotaways, I think is the best example. Those are known. So that means Border Patrol agents either saw on camera, saw in real life, or saw the footprints or whatever else. All these groups of people crossing the border illegally, and they got away. And the agents know the only reason they got away is because they're stuck processing these fraudulent, about 86% are fraudulent asylum claims, that they're basically, taking advantage of these loopholes, and they see it every day over and over and over again. And then some of the conversations I've had with people, Border Patrol is not quite as bad, but it's a little bit like military, right? That you miss a lot of family events. You miss birthdays, you miss soccer games, whatever. But you're always able to tell your family, hey, I'm protecting America. It's a greater good. I know this sucks. I'll make it up to you later, but I'm going to make sure I leave you a good country, a great place to live. But they lost that because the agents feel like now, especially when they're literally processing people and then releasing the vast majority of them into the United States, they literally feel like they're part of the smuggling network now. At the absolute least, they know that they're dramatically reducing the overhead for the cartels and for the smugglers. And it's extremely demoralizing. How does it affect day in and day out decisions? I think the agents still do the best that they possibly can. They want to stop crime. They want to go out and actually arrest the criminal element and everything else. But they're just that conflict of what's right in your face versus what you know is right over the next ridge is very, man, it stresses them out beyond belief. I talk to a lot of leadership in the same exact boat because at the end of the day, we're part of the executive branch though. So they have to actually follow orders and follow the guidance that's legal, that's issued by the administration. And unfortunately, there are competing immigration laws that this administration has basically told them focus on processing. They didn't tell them to not interdict people. They just told them to process them and release them, which is almost the same thing. It's devastating the morale though.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to watch everything. What strategies do you believe are necessary to balance border security and the humanitarian needs?
So let me touch the humanitarian thing, and people don't like it when I say this, but this is just fact. The United States Border Patrol does not have a humanitarian mission. They have humanitarian responsibilities as Americans, but in the federal government, to have a mission, it has to be assigned to you by Congress and funded. The United States Border Patrol is nowhere in the law, there's nowhere in the appropriations that they are given, that they are assigned a humanitarian mission. So what does that mean? It means when you come across somebody in need, yeah, you got to help them, everything else. But our job, our strategy, really, the most humane thing to do is secure the border so that people don't subject themselves to the cartel. They don't actually try crossing the Rio Grande River at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's when the cartel wants them to cross so that they can bring in a second wave. You simply do this. You make it harder to cross, and then you just simply make sure that there's actually consequences for committing a crime. So I'll use the Remain in Mexico program for an example. So it was actually called the Migrant Protection Protocols, but basically anybody that crossed the border that came through Mexico with certain caveats, but for the most part, most of them, if they wanted to claim asylum in the United States, we said, yep, you get to make that claim. However, your court case, whenever it is 6 months from now, 2 years from now, whatever, you need to wait outside the country until a judge adjudicates your case. And then if the judge says, we'll even pick you up at the border, give you a free ride to court. But if the judge says you can stay, you can stay. The judge says you got to go, you got to go. Because 86% of those claims were fraudulent, the flow stopped. Literally, like they stopped coming and the numbers dropped dramatically. That let agents spread themselves out more and actually slow down. So the most humanitarian thing you can ever do to save and help the most people is to actually secure the border so that people aren't enticed into that chaotic, very, very dangerous situation in the first place. And then, by the way, the secondary effect of that is now all of a sudden our legal immigration system would be working again because you wouldn't have millions of people cutting the line constantly. And then we could actually get help to the people that needed it the most, whether it was through asylum, the refugee program, or whatever else. But right now, this chaos is completely destroying both the border security and our legal immigration system. There's just nothing good coming out of it at all.
What lessons from your time as chief of the U.S. Border Patrol do you think are most relevant in today's border crisis?
Listen to the agents. So early in my career, and I'll get to some policy things, but early in my career, a chief, it was an after hours conversation, and we were getting some conflicting information. And by the way, agents don't, especially the union, don't overread into this. But basically, he told me, he goes, hey, if you're ever getting conflicting information from a few people in the Border Patrol, you trust them all, just look at their collar and go with the guy that has nothing or the least amount of insignia, because he has nothing. There's no ulterior motive other than to protect the country. He just wants to do his job. So that's literally, if I go back in the Trump administration especially, why did he support border wall infrastructure? Why did he support some of these different programs to include the migrant protection protocols and these other programs? It wasn't because he had an epiphany and just thought them up. It's because he sought out advice. The advice made sense. He challenged some of it. I got into a couple of pretty good debates with him. Almost felt like an argument. But once he had new information, and this is the thing, once you get that new information from trusted sources, you go with it. So really listen to the agents. Listen to the experts out in the field, not the political pundits, not the congressmen, the senators, or the political appointees. Listen to people that really did the job. And then let's go back to common sense. If the first thing that most homeowners do if they want to control their property is put up a fence around their property, why does it not make sense for us to do that on a national level? If you at your home and everybody else, everywhere else, the very first step you do when you want to enhance security is to make sure that you can control who comes and goes, whether it be the lock on your front door or Ring doorbell camera or whatever else. These are basic common sense principles that really shouldn't be that controversial. And then once you slow down that flow, then the Border Patrol agents, they can get out. And it sidebar tangent, but you can look at the statistics. Anytime illegal immigration spikes, drug seizures as a percentage of activity for the United States Border Patrol tanks. It drops dramatically because the agents aren't out sacking up the dope. Usually the criminal element is the same thing. The criminal element is smart enough to stay in that second wave. So when mass illegal incursions cross, the percentage of the total population that's the criminals actually usually drops. It's not because they're not there. It's because they're smart enough to get away. Just having those common sense, I think, conversations, if you will. Listen to the agents, look at history, what's worked before, and just understand that it's not racist, xenophobic, or anything else to want to know and control who and what enters your home. And we're 80% there because the agents, if you just take the reins off, the agents want to do the job. No one watches all those, like you even, no one watches BORTAC, commercials or sees what they do or sees agents out in these very rugged, remote areas, and then signs up for this job if they don't actually want to control, they don't actually want to secure the country. So let them do it.
Last question. The magic button, how do you fix it? What would you do if you had to? What are the things that you would implement to help fix this situation?
So pretty much the same thing we just talked about. First and foremost, you gotta re-energize the agents, and you have to empower the agents to prioritize their activity for real, based on the highest threats. If you have groups of people standing along the border that are angry, that they're hot or whatever, but they're not moving, and you know that that's cover for the cartel to move something else to your left or right, go get what's left or right. And then that actually started, we do debriefs, everything else, but basically empower the agents to make those decisions to get in the field, to go after the highest risk, highest threats first, and not just go deliver water and everything else. And then re-implement what we know works. And again, not because Trump did it, but because for 27 years we were perfecting the border wall system. You need a barrier to make the agents more effective. We could bankrupt the country hiring enough Border Patrol agents to literally secure the border with human beings only. So let's go back to what works. That border wall system, by the way, also included technology. We can get into that in another podcast sometime. but you do that. But even all that together without consequences, it's a waste of time. There has to be consequences for illegally crossing the border. We have to prosecute people for entering the country illegally, and we have to make sure we end catch and release. And we showed with the migrant protection protocols and some of the asylum cooperative agreements we were putting in place in the last administration, we can apply consequences while ensuring that people get due process and they still get their case heard by a judge. So we're maintaining American values. We're making sure that people that have a claim get it heard, or that want to come here, that the judge hears their case. But we do it in a way that doesn't give them the prize before the judge makes a decision, right? And then the minute that people know there's accountability, the vast majority, which is fraudulent, it goes away because they literally know they can't get away with it. And now the agents become more effective. And in the last 3.5 years, we've seen this very negative domino effect. But in the prior years, we saw a very positive domino effect. When agents have more time to actually interview people, they discover child trafficking because all of a sudden they pick up on clues that this kid is not comfortable with this person. When agents have more time to do interviews, they start talking to the aliens and they start documenting the cartel, the members, how they operate, where they operate, what kind of vehicles, their phones. We share that with the other investigative agencies, and we systematically started dismantling factions of the cartel and making it hurt big time in the pocketbook, taking away their ability to make money. And then every time you do that, the cartels have to move to another area. When you shut down an area, what do gangs do when you move into their area? They fight internally. Well, that exposes them more, and then both the Mexicans and us can go in again and start taking them out. And you see these positive dominoes start falling that make the border more secure, that bring the criminal element out of the shadows so that we can actually arrest them and do something to them. And then every American is safer. It's not rocket science.
Thank you for listening to Borderland and Ironclad Original. See you guys next week.
So we're so excited to launch this new piece for the Navy SEAL Foundation. We're titling it I Am. And the reason why we came up with that title is because we wanted to show who the warrior is. If you know the SEAL ethos, it says, I am that warrior. And so we want to show that warrior through the progression of his life and his family. And we want to draw parallels and call us all to action to be that warrior, that man, that woman, that child, that person making a difference in our community, to follow in the footsteps of these men and women that show us how to live in the NSW community. We're filming at Camp Pendleton here in Virginia Beach. It's a big deal because it is a government installation and because it mirrors so many of the things that so many servicemen and women go through.
ORP here, ISO here, containment here, and primary entry point here.
This piece plays out all the aspects that go unseen inside of the life of a team guy, the life of a family member. It takes a journey from buds all the way into full-fledged dad, operator mode, and all the things that happen. It's very powerful at times, it's very hard-hitting at times. Another really special aspect about this project is it features a Ray Charles song, America the Beautiful. The reason why we selected that song is, like we were talking about, man, what do people not recognize? You know, the repeated explosions, the repeated deployments back and forth, coming home after you just lost your buddy and then seeing your kids that are excited to see you, tucking them in right after that, still training, still learning, you growing, all of these things. And as we were playing out this storyboard in our head, we just kept hearing that song. And we reached out to the Ray Charles Foundation, and for the Navy SEAL Foundation, they made it happen. So it's a very rare song that's being used. It's a really great piece for it to be used on. Everything we do for the foundation, we want it to do justice to the cause and for the community. So we want authenticity, and we want it to make a difference. So we hope you get that from this. We're so excited to launch it.